Chapter 73 Promises, Retribution and Reconciliation Cursed in SP. My hands trembled as I shoved things into my bag. I was a mass of tears, tremors and terror. I could barely see what I was putting in the damn thing through my tears. But only one thing rang through my mind as I dashed around my room. Get out. The evidence had gathered, and some essentials had been the first things to go into the rucksack. So everything else was just a formality. I picked a thick enough jacket for the chill I expected, and a few other pieces of warm clothing. Then I zipped it closed with all the finality I felt. I couldn't do this. It was the dead middle of night. Most of the house was fast asleep, and anyone who was thoroughly engrossed in one activity or another. I turned my shower on, zipped my boots up and threw my hood over my head, feeling the bristled edges of my uneven haircut graze against my neck and shoulders. The window opened with a muffled click, and I climbed out. The bricks of the building were poor ledges for my already unsteady hands to hold on to, but I strained to hold on, fighting back the tears of pain and distraught that threatened to spill over. I dropped the last few feet, not landing nearly as softly as I'd hoped to, and scrambled to my feet. My legs ached from work and their wounds as I sprinted away from everything I'd ever known, and I refused to give them reprieve till I was well into the forest and out of anyone's sight or hearing range. Only then did I contact Tori, sending her only 3 words: I need out. Hayley SP. Months had passed since summer ended and we'd returned to the city, but I missed it all the same. I hadn't realized how constantly my senses were bombarded by an array of harsh human sounds. Sense and sight still had spent a stretch of time without them, or how tranquil I felt being so close to nature for so long. I knew Ari would never agree to it, out of guilt or duty, but everything in me was telling me to go back to our pack to live my days out there. Save for the matter of missing Kel and my turmoil surrounding Tim. They'd probably be content there. Kellen, smart as he was, had started prepping for the December exams weeks ago and spent the day with him in an attempt to find some motivation to read mine. Being 3 weeks away, I was walking to Ari's place after a day of staring at the same page of a PDF on my laptop, hoping for a nap, a distraction. When I turned the corner, Ari's mansion came into view, along with a girl, a werewolf, exiting a taxi in front of it. As I watched her begin the walk up her east driveway, the only thing I could think was that she looked world-weary and wide-eyed. Her short, awkwardly cut hair brushed her neck as she looked around and muted "oh." I hurried the rest of the way to the house, getting to the door as Ari was gently welcoming the girl. She looked up at me as I approached, and the girl followed her gaze to do the same. Her brown eyes filled with a mix of surprise and suspicion. "Good. You're here," she said as she ushered us both inside and out of the nippy November weather. Not that she needed to, radiating warmth as she always did. "Hayley, this is Kirsten, our inside person. Kirsten, this is Hayley, my half-sister." Surprise overtook suspicion on Kirsten's face. That means she's also Clark's child. Kirsten flinched at the mention of his name. "Nice to meet you, Hayley. You too." To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Then couldn't stop myself from asking, "Are you all right? You don't look too good." My question was the straw that broke the camel's back. I realized, as her eyes filled with tears that quickly overflowed. Her sobs were heart-wrenching, her breathing ragged in hiccups and hyperventilation. I took her bag off her and Ari guided her to the living room, sitting with her in front of the fireplace. She flicked her fingers towards the fireplace, sending a small ball of flames that ignited on the waiting when I went to get a blanket and start up some hot chocolate. Kirsten didn't stop crying for well over 2 hours. Several times, she tried to wrestle her composure back, only for the tears to begin anew with more ferocity in their anguish, triggered by memories I was sure I never wanted to live. Eventually, her tears abated, and she was silent with the occasional sniffles and sips of now room temperature chocolate as she stared blankly into the flames. Ari had brought pillows and cushions for us to rest on, some of which ended up being hugged to our chests, and blankets to wrap around ourselves. With the early winter night that had fallen, we were illuminated with the soft, shifting light of the convulsing fire. Neither Ari nor I uttered a word, only sitting with her and ceding with her in support. Our silence continued as she spoke. That monster is no alpha. Her voice was hoarse and barely there. He has to be stopped. Someone has to make him stop. She turned to Ari, her puffy, bloodshot eyes pleading for retribution, resolution, something to make this awful wrong less wrong somehow. Ari tenderly took Kirsten's hands in hers. That's what we're working on. Once everything's in place, we'll stop him, we'll stop them all. Kirsten was crying again. You don't understand. Ari, she choked on a sob. She broke down, crying once more, this time into Ari's arms. Ari's eyes widened slowly in horror, and I got the sinking feeling that, contrary to what Kirsten had just said, she did in fact understand. Many would say that 1.5 years doesn't count as a long time of knowing someone. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing Kishut's enthusiasm. There are people that have known each other for decades. We're sisters. We'd spent precious little of our lives around each other. But in the time we had, we'd been close enough that I could say with measured confidence that I could tell what she was feeling with above average accuracy, even if only slightly. But in this moment, as her expression shifted from horror to something else, I would bet my first-born child that I knew what she was feeling. It was in her eyes, glowing with the astoniest, coldest rage I'd ever seen in a person. It was in the way the temperature went up several degrees in an instant. It was in the way the lazy fire roared to life. Ari was livid. Kirsten pulled away as if she'd been burnt. Thankfully, she hadn't, but she stared at Ari in confusion. Ari didn't address her power, and instead uttered a statement that had all the weight of a vow and nearly had me bending my head to her. I'll kill him myself. Tim had his hands full with spearheading the growth of our pack, and Ari, Kasia and I had imminent exams to contend with, so there was no one immediately available to take Kirsten into our pack. Granted, Kasia could have taken her and been back in under a minute, but her identity as a witch was still undisclosed and on a need-to-know basis, and according to Ari, nobody else needed to know. So in the mansion she stayed. After she had fallen asleep, Ari had carried her up to one of the spare rooms and taken her things there for her to get set up. She had also scheduled for a hairdresser to come over to the mansion, so that by the time Kirsten had woken and eaten, she was set to have a haircut to turn the haphazard cut she had arrived with into a style of her choosing. She opted for a sleek bob that stopped at her chin level. She took tentative trips into the city, stocking up on clothes and things she needed at Ari's insistence. She was always accompanied by either Ari, Kasia or myself for these trips, and we always brought noise-cancelling headphones, spelled to keep up with werewolf hearing. After a few weeks, the darkness in her eyes began to lighten. Soon enough, exams were over and our winter vacation began, so we packed and jetted off to the pack to handle things, introducing Kirsten being the first of them. I ignored the knots forming in my stomach as we walked onto our territory. I continued to ignore them as we were greeted warmly and introduced to the new members that had joined in our absence. Through his introduction to Kirsten and our meetings on our progress and plans for the mate ball, I kept my focus on the meeting topics. I turned a corner on one of the hallways, then saw them. He was leaning on the wall, and she was standing near him, nearer than she needed to be. Stop it. I had no right to my discomfort, or that increasingly unignorable knot in my stomach. My gaze locked ahead. I powered on, fully intending to walk right by them. Haley, Puppy called out as I approached, with a smile full of warmth. I've barely seen you since you got back. How was the semester? I offered her a smile, trying to match mine to the warmth of hers. Hey Poppy. Sorry, I had to catch up with everyone. The semester was all right. Just glad to be done. That's always how school is, isn't it? I really don't miss it. She turned to Tim. Do you remember Mr. Jarvis? You were always such a troublemaker in his classes. Tim smiled at the memory. And you were always his favorite. I was not. She laughed, waving off the mere notion, then turned back to me. This one absolutely could not sit still during any of the man's lessons. Damn near drove him mad. I can imagine. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you how much of a pain in the ass he can be. She continued. I hear you guys spent a while together when preparing for all this. You could say that. Yori responds to snark. So please feel free to tell him to fuck off when he gets on your nerves. I know I have, she said with a laugh, elbowing him lightly, antsy and increasingly irritated. My mouth moved before I could bite my tongue. Yeah, I'm sure you've told him to fuck something. My eyes widened and darted to him, seeing his face for the first time since I returned. His expression bled shock and anger as he looked at me with eyes that made me want the ground to swallow me whole. Cocky, on the other hand, looked hurt and entirely taken aback. Haley, I'm sorry if I did anything to hurt you or... Tim put his arm out in front of her, making himself a wall between the two of us, almost like he was protecting her from me. You have nothing to apologize for, he declared. His eyes narrowed at me. The back of my eyes pricked red with tears and my face was on fire. From embarrassment, from guilt, from shame. I am so sorry, Poppy. I don't know why but I knew. I knew why. The bitterness at their closeness that had been bobbing and weaving away from acknowledging had reared its ugly head in the worst possible way, with vitriol and in front of him. I think it'll be best if you just leave. His voice was piercing cold and his eyes were repelled from me, landing on everything but mine. Okay, yeah. I'll just. My voice was small, my feet already carrying me away. Go, go, go. I just needed to get to my room, tuck my tail and hide away for the rest of eternity. Before the tears fell, before my throat sealed up, before my heart burst, Ori had had herself. Tim and I placed in different wings of the general house, each of us to maintain order our respective wings, with Koesha in a Reese wing. By the time I got to my room in my wing, the tears were already falling. Thankfully, no one was around as I slipped through my door, my hand over my mouth to muffle the sobs. My room was blurry from the tears that refused to stop falling, and my head was already throbbing from the force of my sobbing. The lump in my throat grew bigger with every breath. I wedged myself in the space between my bed and my dresser, crouching on the floor with my arms around my knees. I didn't move for longer than I could keep track of, till the flow of tears slowed to a trickle and I felt like I could breathe and think again. Tootie came in. He didn't bother to knock, his scent being the only thing to announce him. He strode in like he was meant to be here, closing the door behind him, and his eyes went straight to mine. His face was unreadable, an indescribable plain that told me nothing of why he was here and what he was saying. My breath was unsteady again, my heart rate picking back up to the erratic pace it just came down from. Stand up. Slowly, I got to my feet, my hands fidgeting to straighten my clothes as I stood. He strolled towards me and my heart picked up the pace with every step he took. By the time he was standing in front of me, with nothing more than an inch between us, I was sure the pace my heart was going at would have killed a human. I don't know what came over you. He took a deep breath. But I'm telling you now, don't ever talk to Penny, to Penelope like that again. I nodded. My head hung low. Why would you even say something like that? You've already got Kellen. I did have Kellen. It never felt so secure with someone in my life. He was romantic and charming and fit in perfectly with Greg, Trevor and Ari. Our dates were progressively getting more expensive and thought out, and after months of dating, HED begun to bring up the topic of meeting his family. Logically, I should have just agreed, but it kept putting it off. With Kellen, things were perfect, but they didn't feel right. He was my mate. I raised my head, lifting my eyes to meet his gaze. I know. I just cowled and handle you being with Penny. His eyes narrowed. You don't get to call her that anymore. And I'm not with her. Then why are you always around her? Every second that you're not working, you're with Penelope. giggling and skipping down memory lane together. He threw his hands up. Who should I be around than you? When you've spent the last few months keeping me at arm's length. What did you think I wouldn't fucking notice? I was just trying to give you some space. You seemed like you needed it. He threw his gaze up, his hand on his head. Why would I need space with anyone after I told you I'd fucking wait for you? I rolled my eyes. You said that before you found her in the sanctuary. You two have history and you've spent every moment since reminding us all of that little tidbit. How was I supposed to know you still wanted me? His gaze hardened. You don't get to question my feelings for you when you're still running around with that damn boyfriend of yours. At least he knows he wants to be with me. He just came around to the fact after a year of stringing me along. So forgive me if I don't immediately jump into things with you. He stepped forward, and I stepped back, till my back was against the wall and I was staring up at him with a mix of anger and need. In case I haven't made myself clear. Running his thumb along my cheek that left a trail of fire in its wake. I want you, sunshine. I've wanted you from the moment I laid my eye away. Then why did it take you so long? I whispered. I was scared. I didn't believe we could redo this without losing each other. But I do now. My hand went up to his own at my cheek. I want you too, but in the want that's scared this time. You've made me scared. I am so sorry I did. He wrapped his free arm around me, his touch light as a feather. Please let ease your fears. Ease my fears. I was never scared with Callan. He was safe and kind and sweet in every possible way. But Tim was mine, and every part of me knew it. How long could I keep denying it? To my aching extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I whispered. He let out a shaky breath, his eyes searching mine in shock. Why you'll let me? I nodded. He looked like I'd just told him that HED won the lottery. I let out a little yelp when he scooped me up and twirled me around in uncharacteristic elation. His enthusiasm was contagious and I laughed along as I roused him. Finally, he let us fall onto the bed and we laid there side by side. With silent, unbridled smiles at each other. He brought my hands to his mouth, placing kisses on them and rousing the butterflies in my stomach. I swear I'll spend every day of my life making you feel safe. For as long as you let me, then you do better get started. Chapter 70 for Winter Mate Born Latoya SP. I stared myself down in the mirror, searching furiously for any imperfections. My eyes bored into my reflection long and hard, and the girl in the mirror did the same, her glowing brown eyes digging back into me. At a knock at my door, pulling my eyes away from myself. Come in. Smoothing my already smooth dress with gloved hands, Hay walked in, wearing her own gown. It was a simple princess gown with long sleeves and a cold shoulder neckline. But the shimmering gold accent sprawling the dress from the hem of the skirt to the ends of her sleeves made it look simply divine. Her hair was piled atop her head in an almost messy updo that let her show off her elegant neckline and brilliant sun-shaped earrings. She smiled when she saw me, a beam fitting of the endearment Timothy had given her, sunshine. You look gorgeous. Ori, every time I turn around, you get more beautiful. She took a long, proud look at my dress. I really outdid myself this time styling you. Outdid herself she had. While her dress was a sweet princess dress, she'd dressed me to stun and kill. My dress was a figure, hugging mermaid dress with a train that trailed behind me by a few inches and a slit that went up to my thigh. Like hers, mine had accents that worked and danced around the hem of my skirt and became sparser the higher they went. Only mine were brilliant ruby red. My dress was also off the shoulder, but without sleeves and with long opera gloves instead. It chosen to make my hair black, and it's at atop my head in a style identical to Haley's. I blush crept up on my cheeks and I smiled. Thank you, Haley. You look absolutely radiant. Radiant was truly the word. She was beautiful on a good day, but ever since she and Timothy had accepted each other as mates last week, you'd think they somehow swallowed the sun with the way they constantly radiated warmth and joy. Several pack members had joked about them being each other's son with the way they revolved around each other. Her smile grew wider. Thank you. Now come on. Let's go make your debut. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I spared one last glance at my reflection and followed her out, locking my door behind me. As an alpha, my assigned room had been separate from the others of my pack that decided to attend the winter maple. 9 of us had come in total, the 3 girls sharing one large room and the 4 other guys split into 2 sharing rooms. As mates, only Timothy and Haley had been allowed to share a room co-ed. Unfortunately, in a place full to the brim of werewolves, many of which were searching for love, Karsha had decided to stay back at the pack, keeping Kirst in company and taking leadership in our absence, and it seconded her decision. It questioned Timothy's decision to come, being that he was still on the Lightwood's hit list. Achidi argued that the one that had visited his pack was the Gamma, who was unlikely to attend the ball, according to Kirsten. Another point HED presented was that killing was strictly forbidden on the royal territory. It suspected that he had more unspoken reasons for attending that had less to do with our plans and more to do with Haley, but it figured that even if he was somehow recognized, ITD only made them more eager to visit my pack, so I allowed him. Despite the risk, Haley informed me that the others had already joined the party as we emerged to the grand doors to the ball. It'd never been to a mate ball before, but they were as grand as I would have imagined. Glistening chandelier is hung from the high ceiling, reflecting the golden light around the room. A live orchestra had taken up residence in a corner of the room, playing tones that you would most definitely hear in the background of a scene where the love interests of a movie finally reunite. There was a buffet lining one end of the ballroom, and a small cluster of tables for those that decided to do more eating than mingling. I was taking it all in, till I realized that the eyes of most of those present were on the entrance. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My skin heated. I smothered the desire to scurry away from their eyes and held my expression as I followed Haley down the stairs, my back straight in my descent. As romantic as the scene was, I wasn't here to find love. How could I when they were here? He'd smelled them days ago, long before as we'd approached the palace. After over a year, I still knew every note of their scents. Their rancid smells had given me a perpetual dark cloud over my head and a sour taste in my mouth. Haley had noticed after a few hours of my sturdy silence upon our arrival and had done her best so far to distract me. But now, we were in the same room, and it took every ounce of self-control not to rip into them right here and now. My peripheral vision had caught them the moment Haley and I emerged from the doors. Harry sipped a glass of enhanced wine in the corner, his arm slithering up and down Kitty's waist as she whined into his ear about the earrings she'd gotten her not being real. Meanwhile, Brittany stared daggers at the back of the head of the man she'd been dancing with, who was now watching me descend the stairs. Then there was Callum. He was off to a corner, watching me with more intensity than any other person in the room. I ignored him. I ignored them all. As soon as my heeled foot touched the landing, there was a small crowd of men placing requests for a dance. Unlike the Lightwood pack, the royal werewolf still respected the supposed sanctity of the mate bond, especially when it came to alphas. At these balls you were allowed to dance and interact with any werewolf till you found your mate, unless you were an alpha. Alphas could only dance with their lunas. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. All the lunas of other packs as a way to discuss their alliances. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Rejected alphas or ones with deceased mates wait from the restriction. My choice of who to dance with needed to be calculated. As a rejected alpha, I was in the green to dance with any man at the ball, but due to my status, I couldn't just take the floor with anyone. Whoever I partnered with to the music needed to be at least a beta if he was a member of my own pack. The alpha of the Claw Moon pack would have been my first pick. but he was mated and we'd agreed to keep our public interactions brief and cordial, to avoid scaring the lightweight pack out of targeting mine. I scanned the crowd of outstretched hands for a suitable partner, then took one, leading me to the dance floor, forcing the others to stay on the edge of the dance floor to take other partners in the hopes of catching me after the song ended. Bertram Colling, better known as the Blue Alpha, regarded me with amused curiosity as we moved. I'm honored you chose me for your first dance. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Around us, people bristled and shared looks, obviously eavesdropping on our conversation. I offered a polite smile. The honor is all mine. Alpha Calling. It seems your beauty blinded people to your status. I cocked my head. Is that so? There had been a handful of female alphas in history. Not so few that it was still a novelty, but few enough that you wouldn't immediately expect one to be a woman. And as of this moment, to the best of my knowledge, I was the only one currently in power. I was sure my allure had a part to play in them overlooking the power in my scent, but the likely conclusion they'd drawn was that I was just alpha, born, not one in my own right. I would say so, he said as he twirled me. I waited till we were facing each other again before I spoke. You weren't blinded. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. It would appear the rumors are true. He threw his head back in a hearty laugh. According to the stories, the Moontail Pack had been infiltrated by a rogue pack during his childhood. As young as 10 years old, a cheatee sussed them out and struck before they could wreak havoc, single-handedly butchering the 3 rogues within their ranks and sending the blue eyes of one of them back to the rogues. The general consensus was that he was a gifted wolf, but what his gift was, no one quite knew for sure. What we did know was that while small, their pack was notorious for keeping to themselves, steadfastly rejecting alliance requests over the years. Your pack is new, barely 6 months old, but you reportedly have at least 15 allies already. Is this your way of offering an alliance? He laughed again. Sadly, no. I'm just curious as to how such a young pack has managed to make so many friends. I guess we just have the favor of La Luna. The song was nearing its end, and he twirled me again. It would seem so. But his eyes told me he knew there was more to it than happenstance and blessings. The song ended, and he bowed to my curtsy. It was a pleasure meeting you, Alpha Ari, I said to him, and everyone listening. Alpha Ari of the Venga or Sanguine Pack. Brittany, in the middle of her curtsy to her dance partner, stiffened, and from the look on her face, she was communicating, likely frantically, with the others through their mind link. Hook, Inglaise, and Sinker. I said caressed my senses, and my smirk froze. My temperature went up with the fluttering of my heart. He was here. I turned and came face to face with him, his hand outstretched for the next dance. Handsome was my first thought. Well matching was my second. He wore a black 3-piece suit that he filled out well, with a red tie and pocket piece. I took him in, my confusion growing, seeing the look on my face. His lips quirked into a Cheshire grin. So we meet again. It would seem so. I took his hand and let him guide me into a dance. We were silent in our movement, more questions buzzing around inside me with every passing second. Why are you everywhere? I desperately wanted to ask. He still had on those almost obnoxious shades, watching me with what I could tell was a mixture of amusement and enthrallment through them. He let me stew in my questions, knowing I cowed and tasked them with all the ears around and not bothering to offer a single answer. Still, the silence with him was uncomfortable and we moved in tandem, almost like we were made for this. With the song nearing its end, he spun me out, then looped me back in, ending our dance with a dip so deep, I was nearly touching the floor. With one arm around my waist, he grazed my cheek with the softest of caresses, searching my eyes through those shades of his. My breath caught. Before I could register, Chidi brought me back up, bowed to me and disappeared into the crowd. Enthusiasm, disappearing just as suddenly as they appeared. I was left blinking after him when another scent came up behind me. Candia's wine rang low in my head, clearing the fog the stranger had left my thoughts in. I steeled my expression and turned, following the outstretched hand to meet Calamus' eyes. May I have this dance? Chapter 75 Questions of Fate. Natalia SP. OV. The werewolf who rejected me, who stood by as I was demeaned and abused, who had been born into greatness within their ranks while I was seen as nothing more than anthill to kick on their path. Callum stood before me, doing his best to contain the tremors of his outstretched hand, as he looked at me like I was an apparition with those stupid brown eyes of his. From Kirsten S. reports, Chidi been demoted in every way but his title. Cheating on Brittany had garnered him not only her ire, but also that of Harry and anyone who would listen to them, hypocritical as it was, that to the wider werewolf world, he was still the next beta of the Lightwood pack. Net, Candy said in a small voice, not daring to ask what she already knew the answer to. Whatever she still felt for him was dead in me, and she knew it. I let my eyes run down him, then back up to his apprehensive face with a not, at all, forced look of disdain on my own. I had to work to make my distaste look light and vaguely dismissive, as opposed to advertising my hatred on my face for all to see. You'll have to decline. To my agent extraordinaire, Lycan Love Tales, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Then turned away, making my way straight for the Sunshine duo, who had taken a break from spinning around the dance floor and had stationed themselves across the room from Brittany, who was fuming to Harry. I picked up a champagne flute, swirling it in my fingers as I listened in. Who does she think she is? Rejecting a beta as cautious and alpha. She fumed in whispers. I bet I could have gotten her to dance with me. Harry threw a drink back and gave her a look. And I don't think you should speak like that about another alpha. The unspoken not here passed between them, and she rolled her eyes but seemed to get the message from her switching topics. Callum suddenly started begging for us to let him dance with her. I thought you would be a better choice to do it, but your Luna was against it. She must have added something else in their mind link, because Harry suddenly whipped his head to her, his glare severe, while she shot back a smug look. Kylie, who stood next to him, shrank back, almost hiding behind him from Britton's gaze. I smiled into my glass. This discussion is over. You'll handle it. You go dance with your mate, he finally said out loud, after several seconds of intense looks and unspoken words. She shot back, then spun on her heel to join Callum in a dance. Looks like there's trouble in hell. I told Timothy and Haley through the connection Kaisha had set up for the three of us before we left. Timothy replied, that means Kirsten was right. What did he mean by hell handle it? Haley asked, her curiosity painted on her face. I glanced at Harry over the top of my glass, finding him staring at me. If incorrect, it means we've got their full attention. I scanned the ballroom for which of my pack members was unoccupied. Through our pack mind link, I called to Daniela. I'm going to need you to leave the ballroom right after I do and go to the quiet room we were shown. If the window isn't open, I need you to pretend you're hot from all the dancing and open it. Make sure it stays open till I leave the balcony nearby. Yes. To my agent extraordinaire, Lycan Love Tales, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I placed my untouched glass on the tray of one of the passing servants. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to go get some fresh air. I left the ballroom, weaving between bodies and avoiding the ones who were still hoping for a dance with me. Down the hall, there was a smaller, quieter room for people who wanted to get away and talk with a balcony near it. I stepped out on the ledge, closing the balcony doors behind me. The balcony looked out onto the gardens, and beyond them were the palace walls, with the forest stretching beyond the horizon. In the soft crescent moon's light, it was a sight to behold. I heard the click of the quiet room's window opening just as the balcony doors did. Mind some company. I gestured to the space beside me and Harry walked over, joining me to lean over the marble railing. It's a beautiful view, leaving room for me to concur. It was, undeniably so, but even if HED said the sky was blue, I'd sooner open my mouth to retort that it was red than agree with him. I settled for a nod. He shifted on his feet. It's not nearly as beautiful as you are. You turn every head in the ballroom. I kept my gaze on the view. The bile in the back of my throat threatened to jump out of my mouth if I so much as spared him a glance. My will battled my body's instincts to purge myself of both the contents of my stomach and the heat rolling under my skin. To my agent extraordinaire, Lycan Love Tales, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I hardly noticed. He moved closer and I suppressed the shudder that ran through me. You know, I feel like we've met somewhere. I looked at him with the same vaguely dismissive expression it kept with Callum. I'm sure we haven't. Can I ask you why you followed me out here? He blinked at my expression, only speaking when HED recovered his thoughts. I heard you're the alpha of a new pack. I'm an alpha myself, so I know being in charge must be hard. I wanted to offer your pack the chance to ally yourselves with mine. I cocked my head. And what's your pack's name? The Lightwood Pack. He looked smug, puffing his chest at the chance to mention his affiliation. I gave him a blank stare before fighting my eyes about as I feigned trying to remember if it recalled the name that had been branded on the deepest, darkest parts of my soul for as long as I could remember. I don't think I've heard of you. Well, we're not the biggest or anything, but we've got a lot going for us and have a lot of members. It's great there. If you weren't an alpha of your own pack, I would have invited you 'cause you'd fit right in. He rambled on, but I barely heard him over the sound of my blood rushing in my ears. My head was hot, his words ringing like a slap across the face. It fit in. With him. He didn't even realize the look on my face as I was fully glaring at him, pulling on his collar as beads of sweat gathered on his skin that I wanted to char. My hands twitching drew my attention, and I looked down to see them on fire. I moved them behind me, watching him drone on while I willed the fire away. Taking deep breaths was out of the question due to his scent churning my stomach. I needed to get it together. To my agent extraordinaire, Lycan Love Tales, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'm sure you'll gain a lot from our help. Just send us an alliance request and he'll personally make sure it's accepted. Waiting for me to thank him. I'll think about it. My reply was curt. Then I turned away with a withering look. If you'd excuse me, I'm going to join the ball. Or are you going to follow me back too? He was quiet, gaping at me with the eyes of a man with a bruised ego. Taking his silence as my answer, I left him on the balcony. As I got further away, I heard him use some choice words to describe what he thought of me and my attitude, and wonder why he was so hot anyway. When I returned to the ballroom, slipping in through a far less conspicuous door, Timothy and Haley were swept up in a dance, enthralled by each other as they held one another like lifelines. Only upon seeing her beaming smile did I feel some of the tension leave my body. The day she accepted Timothy as her mate and broke up with Kellen over the phone, she had been beside herself with guilt. She had padded up to my room and poured her heart out to me about how he'd been nothing but the perfect boyfriend to her, and how she thought breaking up with him over a call was far less than he deserved. Through her lamentations, my curiosity had gotten the better of me. If HES as perfect as you say, bringing my legs up so I was sitting cross-legged on my bed beside her lying form. Why dump him for Timothy when things were going so well? Course Tim is my mate. To my agent extraordinaire, Lycan Love Tales, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Yeah, but why does that matter? Kellen was the one you spent all that time building a bond with. So why are you choosing Timothy after everything that's happened between you two? She had been silent for a while, finding the words. When she eventually spoke, she looked enviably peaceful, with a smile to her lips as she talked. He feels like home. I don't know the exact science of mates and all that, but being with him feels like coming back from a long journey and finding warm food and a loving hug. I think I always knew that we were going to come back together, But he was scared, and that made me scared to trust him. But now that we're together, it feels like everything is how it's meant to be. It watched her curiously as Shed traipsed off into whatever flowery thoughts were skipping around her head. When she noticed me staring, she gave a little laugh. It's not like I think we're going to live happily ever after and never have any issues for the rest of our lives. Shed smiled at me, looking so serene that it almost wondered what it would be like to feel so much peace that it radiated from you. But I just have the conviction that no matter what we face, we'll be okay as long as we face it together. Looking at them as they painted the dance floor with their movements, he looked every bit as in love as she was. Haley, in her excitement for the ball, had taken dance classes before we'd left New York. With that knowledge, she'd undergone secret lessons with Kaisha on how to properly dance so he could be a good partner for her. And that he was, managing to lead her in the proper steps but also letting her shine with big twirls, dips and spins that left her giggling and grinning from ear to ear any time she locked eyes with him. My hand went up to my cheek, the one the dark-haired stranger had grazed before pulling a Houdini and vanishing into thin air. Net, Candy called once I was comfortably tapped into one of the corners of the room. Why don't we just try talking to him? My eyes darted to the object of her request. Brittany was gripping his arm, glaring at him while spewing a barrage of insults into his head through their mind link. His nose had led his eyes to where I wasn't. He was watching me, paying her little mind, which only served to piss her off more. I took my eyes off him. What would you like to chat about? About the time he helped them break my ribs, or when Brittany wanted to try being an artist and he held me down so she could draw on my back with a dull knife. Oh, maybe about the time he rejected us and kicked me in the ribs for good measure. The stem of the flue in my hand felt so I set it down, moments before it fully melted and spilt the drink. A servant fluttered through to clean the spilt drink up, puzzled at the state of the glass but ultimately saying nothing as he darted away. You and Kirsten are so sure that H.'s an innocent little thing whose only crime is cowardice, that he was nearly as bad as the others. For some reason, you don't think he deserves to be punished. But what about me, huh? What did I do to deserve anything they did to me? Silence. Pitiful, shameful silence. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noble, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Nothing. Net, you did nothing wrong. My gaze found Haley and Timothy again, spinning around in their own little world without a single care. Then I looked back at Callum, still under fire from Brittany while he pined away at me. He rejected us. We're not getting that happily ever after that you want with him. Our story doesn't end on a bed of roses. It ends in a pool of blood. And HES part of the reason why. Chapter 76 stares and whispers Callum SP. Oh, Vishes here. On my way to the ballroom, with Brittany on my arm, I stopped in my tracks. Those were the first words Kay had spoken to me in months. Brittany shot me a deadly look. What is it? Why have you stopped in the middle of the hall like a fucking idiot? I smiled at her. I forgot something in my room. You can go on ahead while I... Her nails dug into my arm, almost tearing the fabric. Whatever you forgot can wait. I am not entering the mate ball without my damn mate. I nodded slowly. Whatever it is can wait. You'll get it later. We continued on, but my mind was looking for Kay to his dark corner. What do you mean by Shess here? Our mate, Shess here, with the sense of at least 2,000 different werewolves. It was hard to pick a single one out. My thoughts went back to 2 days ago, when it smelled someone vaguely familiar while taking something to Harry in the alpha side of the palace. Do you mean the person we smelled 2 days ago? Shed smelled familiar, but months of crying into her torn clothes long after the scent had faded had branded every note of her scent on my brain. That was the same girl I'd driven to death. He didn't respond, so I was left wondering why he would think that. I chalked it up to the essence of the mate ball. I spent the next hour being led around by Brittany, in dances, to conversations, to prop her up in front of alphas at important packs. Over the last few months, Brittany had pretty much cemented herself as the pseudo-alpha, even though the title had already been passed to Harry a few weeks ago. Not that he made it hard. Being Alpha was sitting in the main office with his feet up as he barked orders at me, and the others next in command. An hour in, Brittany ditched me to dance with the beta of another pack, batting her eyelashes at him as he led her onto the dance floor. I let out a sigh of relief and looked around for a drink. The sound of the grand doors opening drew my attention. A blonde wearing a yellow dress that made her shine like the sun walked in, and stepping in behind her was a raven-haired woman. The moment my eyes landed on her, my heart stopped and sped up all at once. She wore a black and red dress that would make any man weak, with her hair on top of her head, leaving her neck bare and me longing to mark it. As she passed a look over the ballroom and descended the steps, my eyes were glued to her form, watching every gliding step she took, every shift in the canvas on her face. I didn't stop watching, even when she chose the blue Alpha as a dance partner, amused and engaged as they exchanged words between whirls. Then she announced herself as an Alpha. Harry, to my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Noban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Brittany called the moment the words left Reese's mouth. I need one of you to go dance with that attention whore. Capac is new and weak, so she'll jump at the chance to ally with us. Harry started moving before Kylie grabbed his arm with a pouting complaint. Let me do it, I told them, hoping my eagerness wasn't apparent. It won't look good if our Alpha offers a partnership to them personally in front of everyone. Let me go as a delegate. Across the room, Brittany rolled her eyes. Just don't fuck it up. I weaved through the crowd of men looking for a dance, my heart beating and my hands shaking, compounding with every step. Finally pushing through, I stood behind her and she must have sensed me, because she turned to look at me. She was gorgeous from afar, but seeing her up close left me speechless. Her beauty was so striking that you couldn't help but stare. She looked so much like the memory of Natalia's face painted with venom that had burned into my memory on the night I lost her. But at the same time, like an entirely new person. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought them sisters. I stretched my trembling hand out, doing my best to keep it and my voice steady. May I have this dance? She regarded me, her gaze running to my feet and then back to my face. The look on her face made something inside me with her. You'll have to decline. Sounding entirely uninterested in anything to do with me. Then left the dance floor to mingle with the girl that had entered the ballroom with her and who I assumed was the girl's mate. Somewhat dazed at the rejection, I started walking back to where Harry, Brittany and Kylie were. Their conversation made me rethink the decision to join them just before I reached them. Who does she think she is? Rejecting a beta just cautious Alpha. Brittany grumbled. I bet I could have gotten her to dance with me. Harry threw a drink back and looked at her sternly. I don't think you should speak like that another Alpha. At least, not here. People don't need to hear you disrespecting an Alpha, or think you disrespect me like that too. He added in our mind link. You worried they'll think you don't do shit at the pack? Brittany quipped, then continued aloud before he could respond. Callum suddenly started begging for us to let him dance with her. I thought you would be a better choice to do it, but your Luna was against it. I guess the bitch can't handle what she dishes out. Brittany spat. Harry's head whipped towards her. Watch how you talk about my Luna. Oh please. She can't stand you dancing with someone else, but had no problem sucking face with my fucking mate. I don't know why you didn't get rid of her when she obviously disrespected you by doing that. If not for the fact that she up and disappeared, I would have said you should pick Kirsten instead. At least she was useful before she ran off. Over a month ago, we'd woken to find Brittany ranting about Kirsten being missing when she needed her. After checking high and low, we'd concluded that she'd left the pack in the dead of the night. Her disappearance had puzzled everyone, seeing as she'd become indispensable to Brittany and proved her competence. But I knew better. Months ago, when Kirsten had arranged for me to discover Britain's cheating, she had confided in me about how she was unhappy with how things were done in the pack, and that she was on a mission to find out how deep our sins ran. Everything I've ever known is here, she'd said, approaching me in those woods. I need to know the truth so I can leave with confidence in my decision. After minutes of her pleading and prodding, I'd given it up. It started off with my own dealings with a conning at Harry's request and gone right down to I suspected that he was connected to some rogues. I hadn't told her about the pack's methods of systematically tearing others down, or anything else done on a scale higher than us. But when I finished talking, she thanked me for helping her make the decision. That had been over a year ago. Kylie is my mate and a good elf knows when to forgive. He didn't even sound like he believed it. She scoffed. Did you forgive her or did your dick do all the forgiving? This discussion is over. They'll handle it. You go dance with your mate, he finally said out loud. She shot back, then made her way to me, dragging me by the arm to join the people on the dance floor. I tried to see what Harry and Ari were up to, only managing to catch him trailing behind her out of the ballroom before I had to return my attention to Brittany to avoid pissing her off. They were gone for about half an hour, and by the time we returned, Brittany had finally let us off the dance rambling on about all the people she had spoken to over the course of the night. As soon as my nose picked up her scent again, my eyes found her, buried away in a corner of the room silently observing. Brittany noticed my divided attention, and her grip on my arm tightened. Don't tell me you're looking at that attention whore. You looking for another bitch to cheat on me with? I should have known. Her voice in my mind faded to a buzz when her stepped gaze suddenly locked with mine, catching me staring. As quickly as she'd looked at me, she looked away, placing her champagne glass down before the drink suddenly spilled. She spared one more look at me before leaving the ballroom for the night. My eyes drawn to her form up until the moment she slipped out the door of the grand entrance. I didn't see her for the night, or when we were leaving the next day. Britain's ranting in my head had given me a headache, but I'd long since learned that trying to argue her down only riled her up more. So silent I stayed, till she eventually slept off on the bed in our shared room while I curled up on the couch. On my way out of the palace to meet up with everyone the next day, my ears picked up gossip exchanged in hushed voices. Did you hear of what happened with Alpha Lightwood and Alpha Ari? I heard some of my packmates mention them. The first voice asked. Yes. I heard he shamelessly tried to hit on her on the balcony last night. The second voice whispered scandalously. To my agent extraordinaire, Lycan Love Tales. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Yeah, even used that cheesy aspect, upline of calling her more beautiful than the view. The first person laughed. Oh, you can't be serious, yes. The second giggled, imitating a deep voice with mockery. Even told her he feels like they've met somewhere before. Was she falling for it? The first asked. Absolutely not. The second said, the eye roll reflecting in her voice. Honestly, she sounded so done and I don't blame her. Wait, doesn't he have a mate? That's the worst part. And apparently, they're not even fated mates. Just mating together. Oh Luna. To my agent extraordinaire, Lycan Love Tales. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. A cheers a sleaze. A sleaze that thinks HE's got power. He tried to offer to ally with her pack cause apparently. They knew, but she hadn't even heard of them. And after all his rambling and explaining, she just told him she'll think about it, but I seriously doubt it. They laughed, making fun of Harry some more, and I left with dread in my stomach. We were werewolves, so our hearing was good enough that gossip and rumors spread like wildfire if you weren't talking in the lowest of voices when we were within earshot. If he'd heard it, it wouldn't be long before Harry would too. That is, if he hadn't already. My fears were confirmed when I joined the others, the dark cloud hanging over Brittany and Harry, and by extension, Kylie having nothing to do with the winter weather. I told you to make them our allies. Brittany raged. She scoffed. Not according to what I've been hearing all morning. If you were going to hit on the bitch, you could have at least done it when no one was around. There wasn't. We were on the balcony with the door closed. Well, obviously someone was close enough to hear you make a fool of yourself. Why do we even need them as allies? Her pack is puny, smaller than all the other ones we've handled. We should just forget about them. She looked at him, the question of if he was an idiot practically screaming on her face. Have you not been paying any fucking attention? They've already got too many allies, and their dues to the royals have been more than any of our spies speculated they'd be. Doesn't mean we need them. He folded his arms across his puffed-up chest. I'm officially telling you to drop this. She laughed in his face. Belittling sound. You're officially telling me to drop this? On what authority? As your fucking alpha. Her smile was wicked and Harry's ego faltered. You may be my fucking alpha, but Dad's the one in charge. And he wants them gone. Chapter 77 Proposals and Requests Natalia SP. Fee. Once again, I found myself inspecting my reflection in a mirror of the Royal Werewolf's Palace. This time instead of the right wing for official duties or the main wing for the mate ball. I had been given a suite in the left wing, the residence wing of the royals. The difference was striking. Instead of a room with an adjoining bathroom, the suite was complete with a parlor for receiving personal guests, a bedroom twice the size of any I'd stayed in during my time at the palace, a closet bigger than I needed for a visit, and a bathroom that could be described as nothing short of luxury. A knock came at the suite door, followed by Mrs. Burton's voice. Are you ready, Your Highness? I left the bedroom and crossed the parlor to open the door for her. She looked at me with that same expression of pride that made my heart long for my mother. You look lovely, Your Highness, she said with a bow. I had her to thank for it. The dress she had found for me was midnight blue, with subtle shimmers that sparkled when I moved ever so slightly, like a night sky with shy stars. It was asymmetrical, with the front stopping at my knees and the back just brushing the floor with the lace-up platforms I wore. My hair had been weaved into an intricate crown on my head, where a brilliant silver tiara was placed. I have the final touch of your outfit. May I place it on you? I turned around as she came up behind me, placing the heavy cape on my shoulders and clasping the thick woven rope across my chest. From what I'd seen of it, my family's crest was embroidered on the back of it, bold and proud for all to see that I was a Siren Lena. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Your Highness, I nodded and followed her out of the suite, where we met a palace guide who took us to the royal reception hall. The closer we got, the hotter I got. By the time we reached the doors, my heart was galloping so fast that I was sure even Mrs. Burton could hear it. My nerves made me glad I'd decided to ask her to come along months ago. The moment I'd finished unpacking after returning to New York in January, it belonged to Mrs. Burton's office. Hello, Natalia. She had greeted me warmly. Happy New Year and a belated Merry Christmas. How was your last trip? It thought back to the excitement in my members' voices as they told me all about how the news of Harry's failed attempt to flirt and invite us to ally with the Lightwood pack had spread like wildfire, and smiled. It was very productive. That's good to hear. What brings you to my office so soon after you've returned? I want you to come with me to the Werewolf Palace. She blinked. The plan I told you about last year. I continued. The one for us to form an alliance with werewolves by offering land that they may not have. I want to go as the envoy to propose this idea, and I want you to come with me. I'm flattered you want me to come, but an alliance like this needs the approval of the High Court. You'll have to convince them before we can do this, and it won't be easy. They have to listen to reason. I insisted. Besides Sirenes, who are vampires' natural prey and vampire hunters that were specifically made to hunt them, werewolves are the only other species that had beef with vampires. They might not be actively at war anymore, but there's a long history of bad blood there. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Let's make them our friends. She sighed. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I'll do my best. Natalia. And so, for 2 months, she had painstakingly explained to every member of the High Court why allying ourselves with werewolves was a good idea. Many had been reluctant or repulsed initially, but Shed won over as many as she could. For the ones that proved stubborn, Shed added that if we succeeded, it would be a new group to benefit from, and if we failed, it would be no skin off our backs. The fruits of her labor came when she was given the votes we needed at the meeting Shed called. A request for a royal meeting was sent, and 1 week later, we were here, standing before the doors that separated us from the royal werewolves. The guide entered the room, his bellowing voice echoing around the room as he introduced us, announcing Her Majesty, Natalia Avi Ariel and Basir and Lena, Princess of the Cyreness, accompanied by the High Court Chancellor, Mari Ann Burton. The end of the introduction was my cue to move. I was supposed to glide in, looking every bit of the princess I apparently was, but my legs felt heavy. I hadn't felt this disconnected from my body since the day I uncovered. Behind me, Mrs. Burton placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, then gave me a gentle nudge that propelled my legs into action. I walked through the doors, reminding myself to hold my head high. The room was oval, shaped, with low lighting from the flickering candle chandeliers. There was a long table that followed the shape of the room, with the king and queen's thrones at one end and another placed at another end with a smaller chair beside it. Their silver eyes followed me as I approached, curious on the queen's part and perplexed on the king's. The queen's silver dress flowed behind her as she stood from her throne, taking a few steps towards me. "Welcome to the palace of the royal werewolf, Princess Natalia of the Cyreness." Her eyes scanned my face and she smiled. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I suspect you've been here before." I nodded. "Yes, I was here last year to register my pack. And a few months ago for the winter make ball. I knew you smelled familiar." The king said from his throne, "You're a werewolf, and a seer, but a werewolf nonetheless. And yet, you have not bowed." I lifted my chin higher. "I will not be bowing today. King Luna." He rested his cheek on his fist. "Then why did you bow when you came here all those months ago?" "Back then, I was here as a werewolf and subject. Today, I am here as a monarch and envoy of the Cyreness." The room filled with silence as my gaze held his. "I am a princess. I am a princess. I am a princess," I chanted in my head, willing myself not to look away. Finally, "Very well, Princess of the Cyreness. Today, we are equals. Please, take a seat." I held in a sigh as I sank into the throne and the queen returned to hers. "You'll have to forgive my husband." The queen placed a hand over the king's. "None of the monarchs we've been visited by have ever been werewolf hybrids, so the rules on how to proceed are rather unclear. But I believe your logic of which side of you we acknowledge depending on the nature of our meeting works well." "Well, yes, it's a tad unclear," the king parroted, then shifted the conversation. "We've never been visited by Cyreness. I wonder, what brings you in this capacity?" "I have come here in hopes that we can facilitate the beginning of what I believe will be a pleasant relationship." They both raised a brow. Our species had basically had zero interaction with each other. The queen said, "We have no idea what the nature of our relationship will be as we have no model for it. It's precisely because we have no model that I believe we can make it work. We can set an example of good relations." "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm." The king's voice was still laced with septistems. "We could set a good example, but why would we bother to undertake that in the first place? Your species isn't exactly one held in high esteem." My mouth tensed. Someone had done his homework. Opinion is subjective. I barely kept my tone measured. Besides, I believe Cyreness have more to offer than you might realize. The king opened his mouth to speak, when the queen gently squeezed his hand. "We're curious to hear what that might be. Werewolves are facing a deforestation problem." "Go on. You may have it under control for a while," I continued. "But humans, being humans, will eventually either decimate or subdue every wooded area on the face of the earth. And you believe you can get them to stop? The king quipped. I don't have to. What I can do is offer werewolves some space in our world. Your world. Apparently, someone hadn't done all his homework. Sereness have their own world. I informed them, many generations ago. My ancestor created a world for us. And I can assure you, there is no deforestation issue there. From what had been told, many Sereness had an affinity for nature and the natural element. Aside from 2 or 3 cities, many cities had been built with the incorporation of the natural landscape of the area. Even the capital city was partially woods and waterfalls. The king and queen were silent, communicating again. I assumed, their faces were mostly unreadable, that something told me the queen was gaining ground. If we were to take you up on this offer, the king said slowly, how would you propose we implement the idea? Portions of land will be designated for werewolf settlers. After constructions and provisions have been made, the news can be made public and packs that want to move will apply. The decision on whether or not to accept their application can be made after an audit of the pack's history and conduct. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobin, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Economic exchange and stimulation will be encouraged between the settlers and the locals. In other words, taxes and barter. You've given this a lot of thought. The queen stated yes. I nodded, glancing down at my hand with the crest and her bite marks. I am a Siren, but I am also a werewolf. I want us both to be prosperous and have a relationship that will make my very existence not seem unnatural or unwelcomed. Very well. I can admire your desire to bring 2 parts of yourself together. And this deal will be helpful in the not so distant future. Let's discuss it further. Hours passed as we went over the idea, right down to its skeletons. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobin, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. There would be an official agreement signed in the presence of an encounters to bind us to our major obligations, but the details were up to us. After our meeting, the king and queen bid me a pleasant farewell, and Mrs. Burton and I were ready to return in under half an hour. Thank you for being with me, I told her in the SUV taking us to the airport. Her smile was warm. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. You were born for this, Natalia. Thank you. I shook my head, but I was so nervous. Having you there gave me some confidence. She placed her hand on mine. I barely needed to say a word. You're more capable than you give yourself credit for. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobin, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobin, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. My voice small. At the airport, we parted ways. She got on a flight back to the city while I made my way to my pack. Since it was still spring break, I wanted to spend the last few days of it with them and check on how things were progressing. When I arrived, I was welcomed warmly by new faces. According to Timothy, after the mate ball, we'd gotten several join requests, but I was still surprised to see so many. Looks like you caused a bit of a stir at the mate ball, Candy said as I was introduced to the new people. When the introductions were over, Timothy followed me to my office for a progress report. Besides the influx of new members, how have things been going? I asked him as we sank into our seats. They've been good, more than good. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nobin, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Our produce has been coming along great and we've started getting settlers in the human side of town who are buying the local produce as well as the things we import and mark up. Also, our shop online is doing well. You were right about people and their love for minifigurines of plain shit. They're selling better than some of my best work. He huffed. And then, his face went hard and he nodded. They sent another allegiance request yesterday, for 2 weeks after the mate ball. The red being nothing but silence from the Lightwood pack. It almost wondered if it overdone it and bruised their ego too much by facilitating eavesdroppers on Harry's antics that night. My growing worry had abated when the first allegiance request had arrived. Timothy had wanted to speed the process up and accept it the moment it appeared in our inboxes, but it stopped him, and it continued to stop him from accepting the 3 other requests that had come after. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Nilban, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. His brows shot up. You're not fucking with me, are you? I chuckled, shaking my head. I think it's time we begin to welcome them. He'd wanted to keep ignoring their request till the end of May, when I could invite them with ample time to spend toying with them. But I wasn't sure if they'd persist for 2 more months. I wanted to give them the carrot before rolling the stick back out by making them wait for an invitation to our territory. Besides, I pulled their request up on my computer and turned it to him with a grin. 5 times the charm.